Hello, and welcome to another edition of Math Dive in 5. My name is Daryl Frost.
I'm Barbara Knox. Thank you for joining us.
So on the next slide, you're going to, in just a moment, I should say, you're going to pause the video. You're going to complete the task on the next slide on your own or with your grade level team or partner. As you're working through the task, reflect on the 3 questions you see on the slide.
We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Happy
problem
solving.
solving.
So taking a look here at our progressions with BEST focused on time, you can see at primary, they're focused on telling time at various intervals. Third grade is the first time that they start learning about elapsed time.
Correct.
And that's what we're going to focus on here today, focusing on how to determine elapsed time, considering open number lines as a strategy. And then as it moves through fourth and fifth, it gets into multi-step problems involving all the operations and so forth. So here we have the actions, your telling time, your writing time, and your solving, which is the focus of the elapsed time. So we're going to really focus on that solving piece. Vocabulary, you see there, it's a lot, understanding AM and PM, and really connecting that to language, like knowing that AM is before noon, the time between midnight and noon, and at PM, afternoon, the time between noon and midnight. I think it's important for kids to have that understanding, and understanding that elapsed
Especially when
time.
they're doing elapsed time, because some of your times might be AM and others PM.
Well, actually, that's interesting because that you say that because with the BEST benchmarks, they don't cross over.
Oh,
It stays where they don't. So that's one of the changes from maths to BEST. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So they don't cross over between AM and PM. Okay, so we're back now. Everyone is hopefully solved using
an
an open
line.
number line. So you begin with what? Just drawing a number line. The
Correct.
kids would know how to do that.
I wouldn't even need to have anything on that number line necessarily.
But I know that I'm going to use an open number line. And where would you begin?
I would start. So I know I'm going to study for 47 minutes. I would want to know what that 47 minutes looks like on my number line.
Okay, so perhaps something like this.
Okay.
So you see the elapsed time there, right? It is to 47
And
minutes.
most third graders can skip count by 5, so that's very realistic that they can make a skip counting by 5's number line.
That's using patterning, which goes to the MTRs. And then what about labeling?
Well, I need to label my start time was 2:55, so that would be at the beginning of my number line.
So that very first tick mark.
Yes.
Something like that.
And then from there, I'm going to try to get to the nearest hour. So I know 5 more minutes, it's going to be 3 o'clock. So my first jump should end at 3 o'clock.
And they could also be using a Judy clock too,
They
right?
could.
So they're moved it to now it's at 3 o'clock. How much time has elapsed? These are questions that support student understanding.
From here, I'm probably going to use those benchmark intervals. So I know quarter after would be 15 minutes. So I'm going to take 3 of those jumps. 3 jumps of 5 is 15 minutes. And label my 3:15, do the same thing with 15 more minutes would land me at 3:30.
Before we go on, let's just have a conversation here about this 3:15. What might be a misconception students have here?
Well, they're seeing 20 up there at the top, so they might think that it's supposed to be 3:20.
Because what are they not thinking about?
Starting at 2:55.
They're not starting at 2:55.
Right.
Or they may put that 3:15 under where you see that 15 at that tick mark.
Correct.
But they have to think about the elapsed time.
Correct.
All right, so take us then again from 3:15.
So 15 minutes after 3:15 would be 3:30. So
all right, so
3 more jumps. There's my 3:30.
So how much elapsed time has passed so far?
35 minutes.
35 minutes, okay.
From here, I'm just going to count by 5. So 3:35, 3:40, And then I have to count on by ones to get to that 47 mark. So 341, 342 should be where I land
So what time did he finish studying?
at 342.
At 3:42. So that the big misconception here is thinking about that 5 minutes that passed from 2:55 to 3 o'clock.
Right. And you heard my thinking. So jumping from 3 to 3:15, I might have done all in one jump of 15 minutes.
Yes.
So my first jump might be 5 minutes. I start my number line at 2:55. I jump 5 minutes to get to 3 o'clock. Then I make one whole jump of 15 minutes to get to 3:15, another whole jump of 15 minutes to get to 3:30. I don't always have to do
This
5
is just
minute
an example.
jumps.
It just depends
Correct.
really on the number sense because this is patterny, but we all have to remember what? That the 5 minutes elapsed at 3 o'clock already.
Right.
We can't forget about that 2:55 to 3 o'clock,
Correct.
which would be the big misconception here. So on to your task, the second task, you're going to pause the video, complete the task either by yourself or with a partner or team. As you are working through the task, reflect on the 3 questions you see on the slide.
See you back in a few minutes.
All right, so here we are on this soccer problem. Uh, what operation is involved with this part before we even think about a
Well,
number
I'm
line?
thinking about that last problem was addition, but this one tells me when it ends, so I'm going to have to go backwards to find when it started.
So we think about start time, end time. We know the end time when soccer ended.
Correct.
Which was at what time?
At 11 o'clock.
At 11 o'clock. So we think about that. We see here, what does that represent?
So I'm at the end of my number line, moving backwards because I'm going backwards in time to find the start time.
And typically third graders or any student, subtraction is more challenging with it when we talk about elapsed time.
Right. So here, one thing that happens, I'm going from 11 o'clock to 5 minutes earlier. Some kids are going to say that that's not 10:55, but 10:95.
Yes.
Because they think about regrouping like they do with
Whole
addition and
numbers.
subtraction of
Yes.
whole numbers,
Yes.
not thinking that, oh, there's only 60 minutes in an hour, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that jump back from 11 to 5 minutes earlier is actually 10:55.
And you could actually have students partnering up. I could see if we're creating the number line, have a clock next to it, one of those little mini clocks.
Yep.
Move back 5 minutes. What time do you see? Connect it to what you have on the open number line.
Right. I'm going to go back 5 more minutes to 10:50, 5 more to 10:45. Now I'm going to start thinking about those 15-minute intervals. So 15 minutes earlier would have been 10:30.
Okay, we'll record that there.
5 minutes before that was 10:25.
And we'll record that there.
5 minutes before 10:25 would be 10:20.
How much time has elapsed so far?
40 minutes. So I know I only have 1 more minute to go. And 1 minute before 10:20 would be 10:19.
And you see how that last 5-minute interval was decomposed into single minutes.
Correct.
And there it is. And that could still be happening on the clock. You addressed the big misconception here. They're going to think about their number sense and think about subtraction with whole numbers and thinking about hundreds.
Correct.
Like, I took 5 from 100, it's 1095. Well, that's not how.
That's not a time.
That's not a time. So, and it takes practice with this, right? And
it does.
And all the labeling. We could have even had, what could we have had on that very first tick mark on the left if we want to think about hours? We could have put 10 o'clock there
if we know that this is the correct number of minutes.
Yes.
If this is a 60-minute line, yes.
We could have, well, and thinking about a third grader who knows, well, I know there's 60 minutes in an hour.
Right.
And so I know that soccer was less than an hour. So I'm just going to have that time there just as my frame of reference. But it's not necessary, but it's just all in how they think.
Daryl, there's one other type of problem that students might encounter with elapsed time. We showed finding the end time and finding the start time, but students might also have to figure out how much time has passed.
Oh, so if you think about that soccer problem,
Mhm.
if I know that, well, I could just take the same thing. If I know it started at 10:19 a.m. and it ended at 11 o'clock a.m., how long did soccer practice
Correct.
last?
Correct.
That's just taking that
Mhm.
same thing. They're still using an open number line or a clock
Right.
and figuring out,
How
how
much time has
much
passed.
time passed. So taking a look at this here, possible misconceptions, I want to highlight that sub-bullet there about the hour hand, because there is some misconceptions about the hour hand. What do you notice it's saying that we shouldn't do?
Well, it's saying that we shouldn't teach kids that the hour is whatever the hour hand's pointing to, because sometimes it's going to look like it's pointing to the 8 when it's really in the 7 o'clock hour.
Or thinking about like between 2 and 3, if it's somewhere between 2 and 3, it's not 3 o'clock yet.
Right.
So if you take a look here at this clock, you see that rectangle there. That entire rectangular area is showing which hour?
The 2 o'clock hour.
It's the 2 o'clock
So
hour.
anything between the 2 and 3 is
2 something.
something
Yes.
until it gets to 3 o'clock.
So that's something important for students to see that.
Yes.
So here's the CRA process. Once again, we can begin with actual clocks where students are manipulating the hour and minute hands, connecting that to open number lines, and then the abstract reasoning. If we think about that soccer problem, we had to figure out when Jack started playing
Right.
soccer because we knew the end time,
So
right?
we know he started at 10:19 because we counted
Back 41 minutes. So it's that kind of thinking.
You have to be careful with that abstract thinking and make sure that kids are regrouping in 60 minutes instead of the 100
If they're thinking about
minutes.
subtraction
Right.
and using numbers with the clocks, they got to think about the numbers that make sense with time.
Right.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Math Dive in 5.
We'll see you back next time.